Welcome to the new class on stories behind the headlines. I'm going to be covering a subject which I think is very important, water nationalism. We've heard of vaccine nationalism, we've heard of political nationalism and all that, but I think this time there's also something called water nationalism. By that, what I mean is that countries who have access to water, it's a big resource, and therefore they are able to try and exercise control over it. So long as it is a domestically organized program or project, then I think there's no problem. But the moment we have rivers which are crossing the boundaries of from one country to another, then there is that issue that how do we in fact manage to have a win-win situation so that the upstream countries don't hog all the water and the downstream get little. So what we have here is an issue that can be leading to wars. I'm sure if countries don't exercise some sane policies towards water sharing, it is going to come to war. And I think there are lots of flashpoints for that. Today, what I want to do is to look at and see, say, for instance, in China and in that region of China, which is the Tibet plateau, which in fact has the source for all the major rivers in Asia practically. I will go into that, and we'll start off by looking at China's two big rivers, and thereafter the other rivers that also emanate from the Tibetan sort of plateau and go into India, into Southeast Asia, and that I think, and of course Pakistan as well. You have really an issue that has to be brought together so that everyone wins and not anybody loses out. So let's see what we can talk about today on that. We know that climate is impacting on all sorts of areas of our lives. And of course, water is also going to be one of them. And in the case of water, it's so essential for us. It's like air that we breathe, that without water, we can't. Sometimes you can go without food, but without water, we can't. So it's an invaluable resource, and we have it really free, like air is free. But yet we need to exercise some sort of common sense about it and be able to use it and not waste it. Now we know that climate is impacting water because glaciers are melting. And what that means is that you can cause flooding. When glaciers melt at a higher rate than normal, then a lot of water comes through the rivers causing floods. And flooding can destroy crops and the land immediately to it, around the river banks and so on. So big sort of issue there. Another thing is that when you have large lakes, for instance, they also, and not only lakes, but also rivers, they have a lot of evaporation taking place. One case that I will mention later on is the case of Chad, where evaporation has led to complete sort of destruction of the lake with hardly any water left in it. And Chad, as you know, is a very big lake, 10,000 square kilometers or something like that in Africa. And of course, we also know drought. Drought is when you have no water, no rain, and therefore we need to be able to have water of the right quantity throughout the year, especially during planting season and so on, which is what happens normally speaking. Plants, fields are planted during the early sort of spring, and then of course during summer you have the rains coming in, and then you have the harvesting after that. So water, in fact, natural cycle is there for water. But we need to be able to now manage the water better because we are affecting the climate, and climate is influencing the rain and all its issues that we get of type of um, if you like mismanagement. So I'd like to sort of look at that a little bit as to how we can manage these rivers better. We know what plans are underway, and this is what we're going to be talking about as to what the various projects are. We'll start off by looking at the big rivers of China. Now, I'm looking at it because China, being such a big country, and also being, having Tibet as part of its territory, and you have all these rivers emanating from Tibet, which supplies the water for half the world's population. That is China, India, and Southeast Asia, and so on. And these are the rivers. We're talking about Mekong, Nile. Nile is, of course, not part of that group, but the Indus is, and this is also not part of that group. So let's see what we can see. Okay, here is a picture of the plateau. The plateau is this area just above India, which is where Tibet is. And you can see all these rivers emanating from it. Now here you can see this China. These are Yangtze and the Wango. And these are the Mekong down there, coming right down. The Ganges here, and the Brahmaputra here, and the Indus there. So you can see similar type of representation there. Now looking at the geography of China, we see that it is quite distinct. You've got the plateau of Tibet, which is where all the water is going to be sort of flowing down from. Then you've got the desert area up here north, and the plains here, and South China, which is very fertile, and that's where most of the uh, population is in this eastern region of China. With another same picture of with a bit more detail, you've got some deserts in being defined: the Gobi Desert, the Uyghur region desert over here, Takia, Makam, and then you've got the sort of tributaries sorry, here we are. Okay, this is not the map that I want to show, but you can see plainly here's this the plateau of Tibet. This is showing us the two big rivers of China, the Wango and the Yangtze. And you can see they start from this Tibet area, the plateau. And then, of course, in thinner lines, you can see here the Mekong, see, it's also starting from there, going right down to Cambodia, down south, Vietnam. Then you've got the Brahmaputra starting, behind the Himalayas, where the Everest is, and then coming right down into Bhutan, into Bangladesh. And then the Ganges also coming from there behind into Bangladesh, yeah? And the Indus, as you can see, also emanating from there. So you can see such a fantastic area of Tibet is really the source for so many rivers. This is telling you how long they are, 3,000 miles. Some idea you can get from the saying is from New York to California. So quite a long river. And the Yangtze, it's the third largest in the world. And a lot of farming goes on either side of these rivers, and therefore really the lifeline for people. Now, because it is such an important resource, and because rivers are transnational, you need to be able to get together with other countries to hammer out an acceptable agreement. Because what could happen is that the upstream countries can block the water, build dams, retain the water, and let only little pass through. And the downstream countries would sort of course, be without water, leading to droughts and so on. So you need to have a good agreement between the countries through which the water, which the river flows. Now, what China is doing by way of having to do water management is to connect these two rivers. You've got the Yangtze down here and the Wango down there, and is connecting the two in such a way that there is no, if you like, loss of excess of water in one and loss and diminution of water in the other one, so that there is an even flow. And the other fact is also that China is developing this humongously big city called Jingjingji, which is 130 million for population of 30 million. It combines or brings together Beijing, Tianjin, and this Hebei into one big city. So they're planning for the future, you can see, thinking far ahead. Now, this is the canal that goes from one river to the other, and we'll see in the next sort of picture how it is. Here we are. In the old days, and this is a thing that I picked up, it is about 476 BC. So that's going back in time, over 2,500 years, where the early sort of rulers of China realized the importance of having a canal right up to connecting these two, from Shanghai to Beijing. And they used it mainly to, ferry goods, waterways, if you like. So that was a very useful sort of thing. Now, a modern version has also been created, which is this one. And so supplying that big megapolis city, connecting the Yangtze here. That's called the Eastern Route. Then you've got the central one, which is again connecting the Yangtze to the Wango here. And the western one, which is connecting the Wango again to the Yangtze, but it's not done yet. So these big canal systems, one of them is, nearly 1,800 kilometers long, this eastern one. So you can see it's a humongous big projects. Now I'm showing this here because in trying to sort of bring water from one to another place, they've got in here in Dam Jongku a big reservoir that they have made by building a dam and containing the water from one of these rivers and building canals to them. And from there, they flow that water down through the canal to the big city that they're planning. And already that sort of thing is getting water up to about 70% from this reservoir. These are the type of constructions that they do for preparing the water to transfer the water from south to the north. You can see, they build the dams to contain and make that reservoir there. It's called the Dangjingku Reservoir. It's quite high up, so 170 meters above sea level. So the water can then flow down towards Beijing, which is at the sea level. So here we are, just another few views of that reservoir. And it benefits, of course, millions and millions of people. Now, what is the benefit? 30 rivers are being interconnected and repopulated by having that water being redistributed. 20 cities are in fact gaining from it. As I said earlier, 70% of Beijing water supply comes from these canal connection. And it has this benefit of over 14 billion per year. So you can see these types of projects, 30 rivers, they are benefiting here. That's the economic activity, and therefore, of course, transforming people's lives. The tap water of Beijing, 70% of it is coming from this. Now, these are the transnational type of rivers here. Okay, these are the domestic ones. So whatever they do, it doesn't concern the other countries too much. But the moment they try to sort of do something about these, the Mekong and the Brahmaputra, the Ganges and the Indus, then of course other countries are involved. And then you have to start talking to the other countries to be able to manage the flow. And the flow of the water has to not to take into account the flooding aspects of it, because if you don't do anything about water management, it causes flooding or it causes drought. And of course, it doesn't sort of produce any hydropower for you. So you need to have dams to be able to sort of manage that. So we'll talk about that a little. Now, let's look at Mekong here. Mekong goes through from China to Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. So you get a heavily populated region, very populated here as well. And we're going to be able to have some type of an agreement, which makes everybody, quite happy to manage their water the way that they agree on. And one of the things that China has done is that they're saying, okay, what we'll do is we would prefer to have a bilateral agreement with each country because they are the main people who are, in fact, having the source coming in from China into these countries. They're saying we can manage the water and let the water come through each of your countries in a manner which is going to be beneficial to all. And of course, they're making big investment in that score, 66 billion into so many projects, 227 billion. These are hydro projects and irrigation projects and dams and so on. Here's a detailed picture of that Mekong River. This river, as you can see, there's lots and lots of dams here in China itself. And then it comes into Myanmar here, down into Laos. Now, Laos is a landlocked country. It doesn't have access to the sea. So waterway, this river is the only way of getting into the sea if they have to go through the river. Then you've got the Cambodia here. Then you've got Vietnam here. As you can see, lots and lots of dams have been built, some of them with the help of the Chinese, so as to manage the water better. So, according to research, the fisheries, now some of the things that do get affected on the river is the fish, because traditionally people have lived along the banks of the river and fished and made their livelihood. But if you put dams in between and contain the water, free flow stops. So what you need to be able to do is to have a continuous flow of this water happening so that it doesn't sort of kill off the fish, and it doesn't sort of prevent the sediments also not coming their way, because the nutrients are in the sediments and it's important for them to be flowing along with the water, and that enriches the life in the water there. So that type of an agreement has got to be there in order for them to have some benefit. So there is a lot of benefit to that extent that is mentioned over here. Now, the problem is, of course, that, if we don't have an agreement, then somebody can block the water, dam it, and keep it to themselves. So what they have to do is to be able to say, look, we can't sort of stop people from having water, so they have to come to an agreement. By 2040, they're saying they're going to be able to have a 16-fold increase in economic benefit if you have an agreement and build these dams and let the water manage better. So new dams, they say, is going to reduce the income of the fisheries by up to 15%, because it stops the sediment reaching the river because it gets blocked by the dam. So there has got to be means of letting the sediment along with the nutrients also go with the water. So loss of such nutrients and sediments can be disastrous for fish and agriculture, particularly in the delta. So you've got to go right down to the whole sort of way to manage that sediment and nutrients and water. So what we have is the Mekong supporting so many millions of people. And I think what they're saying is that with that new hydroelectric dams that they're building as well, that they will be able to sort of build an economy with green energies, technologies. So that's where they're headed as well. This is just to show you a picture of how the Brahmaputra River in India, which starts here from here, goes right down to the Bay of Bengal here. The river here in China, which is part of the Brahmaputra, if you like, it's called the Shangpo. The Shangpo becomes the Brahmaputra. And therefore, it's something that India and China has got to sort out as to how to manage that water. Because, China is going to be saying, look, we are going to want to try and feed this water into our desert region, which is the Uyghur region. And Uyghur is a big desert there, and people are very poor. So this big project bringing water there through a 1,000-kilometer tunnel, which they're going to be planning to build. They haven't built it as yet, but there's going to. But for that, they need an agreement with India as well. Yeah, there's that river Brahmaputra, and this is the Zangbo emanating and on the Chinese part. All this is the Chinese part. Then it comes into the Bhutan area, Bhutan here, into India, into Brahmaputra there. And these are the power stations that have been built along the way. A power station doesn't stop the water totally. It sort of contains a little bit, but lets most of the water flow, so long as the electricity is produced and the maintained in the level of the reservoir is maintained so as to have continuous flow in the river and generate power. These are the type of constructions that build along the river so that they can manage the water. This is the plan that they have, which they haven't as yet implemented. This is to make the Uyghur region green. And they're going to sort of pipe this water with a 1,000-kilometer tunnel from the Tibet side to the Uyghur desert side. There's another details showing the picture of the deserts over there. They're going to have to do that. The project hasn't started yet, but they are going to be able to work on that after they agree with India on the use of some of the water from the Tibet, from that Shangpo River as well. Yeah, this is where they're going to be taking the water from in Egypt, right up to this Taklamakan desert in Xinjiang, which is the Uyghur region. So they'll have to, use some of the water coming. This is Tibet, and all these waters coming down here will have to be, in fact, rerouted. Now, this is the river Indus also has its sources. This is China, this is the Tibetan plateau. And the Indus also has the Punjab. The Punjab gets its name from this five. Punjab, Panch means five. And it's got these five tributaries. So you've got this Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Bais, and Sutlej. Some of them are coming from across Kashmir, and therefore through a disputed area. And as you know from the history of Kashmir, India and Pakistan are at odds. And therefore, they had to have an agreement in early days to try and share the water. And that treaty is still holding, because I think it would be, disaster for both the countries if the agreement is not followed. Because all this region is now a disputed area still. But water has to keep on flowing. And in order to do that, that agreement is there. This is the agreement. So it has lasted, I think, a good few years to date. It was done in the 50s or 60s, I think, so it has held out 60 years. So nobody can block the water from upstream. They can contain a little bit of it for their local needs, but they can't sort of block it and not have any water flowing downstream. Otherwise, that would lead to war straight away. Both sides are very clear on that. When they go to war, nobody is going to win. Now, I told you one of the things that China did is to build a huge number of dams for its domestic rivers, something in the order of 87,000 dams. Now, in India, I know that I think the figure I heard was about 3,500 dams. But in Pakistan, it's only about 50. So Pakistan has got to go quite far in having to develop its dams so as to try and control the flow of water, because it leads to flooding like this. If you don't have the water coming to dams and then let the water only flow through when it's required and at the same time generate electricity. These are times that the thing of building. They cost a lot of money. The one that is underway at the moment in Pakistan, I think is going to cost about $6 billion. Okay, coming on to the Nile. There's a dam here that's being built here in Ethiopia. The Blue Nile here and the White Nile are the traditional sources of water for so many countries. But lately, what has happened is Ethiopia decided to build a dam here and make a big reservoir so as to generate lots of electricity. Now, if they do that, then it's going to affect the flow of water in the Nile River, and downstream countries are going to be faced, and that could be a big, big area of conflict in the future. So here we are talking about, if there's no agreement, then there's going to be war between, and Egypt, I think, is quite prepared to go to war. And what it means if they go to war is that they can drop bombs onto the dam and finish it off within a few minutes. And therefore, there has got to be. In fact, I think while Trump was in power, both Ethiopia and Egypt were having talks under Trump's, ages, but I don't think it worked. So there's no agreement as yet. This is a more detailed picture of the Nile, showing you all the dams that are on the way. And the new one that is coming in, which is the Grand Renaissance Dam, as it's called, is going to be developing 6,000 megawatts of hydroelectricity. So Ethiopia hopes to make some big money out of generating electricity. It will be the way that they can utilize. But in order for them, that dam to be producing electricity, they have to store water. And storage means less water downstream. So this is the problem. Here we have the picture of some of the countries there. Yeah. Okay, these are the other countries also that are impacted by the Nile, and you can see it affects millions of people downstream. Starts from here, from Victoria Falls. In fact, is one of the sources of the Nile, and the other one starts in Ethiopia from there. So one starts from there, and the White Nile starts from here. Now the problem is this: if they build a dam in Ethiopia, then the water has got to be retained. So less water has to will flow through. So what that means for Egypt is that if it takes 10 years to fill up the thing, which is a long time, only 18% of its vegetation is going to be affected, and depletion of this water table by 14%. But if Ethiopia takes 7 years to fill it up, then there's going to be even more of an impact on Egypt. 33% of the green is going to be vegetation will be affected, and water table is going to go down. But if it did 5 years, it means half the green crops of Egypt will disappear. And Egypt, I don't think, is going to agree to this 5-year period of letting water accumulate. So Ethiopia will have to think in terms of 10 to 15, 20 years even to fill up the reservoir. But in the meantime, it doesn't mean that they can't profit from it. It means that it's just the level of the water is going to be lower. So here it is saying that the Sudan and Egypt, the Blue Nile could not be more important. It's really very important. Depending on the time of the year, it accounts for between 50 to 80% of all water. If it were to stop today, 150 million people would lose their jobs in an instant, with another 150 million following close behind. So it is going to be enormously sort of important to come to an agreement. I've put this up in order to show you how evaporation sort of causes immense of a damage. Now, evaporation is when the water gets, if you like, sucked up into the atmosphere. But it happens more sort of seriously when the level of the water is shallow. And the shallowness of that lake comes about if the silting takes place, when the water coming into the lake brings in silt. And over centuries, the silting has been so much that it has become very shallow. The result that from 63 to 87, you could see most of the thing has evaporated with just little water there. And that causes humongous amount of difficulty for local people. Migration is one of the things they do. Now, there's a project to try and help that situation. Zaire has a very big river, the Congo River, and it has immense amount of water that goes into the sea. So what the plan is by some of the countries in Africa is who are affected by this, they want a canal to be built so as to feed the lake from the tributary of the Congo River. By only taking 3% of that water from the Congo, they can fill up this lake over a period of time. And that is a project the Chinese said that they can build the canal for them, and we'll see. It hasn't been politically agreed as yet by the countries. There's another picture of that. Okay, so I'm going to sort of leave that here now. Sorry, I had to repeat this solo because I forgot to record it in my original talk. But the Q&A has been recorded. Thank you.
Thank you, Shafiq. Very good. Very interesting.
Yeah, again, I forgot to record it. Yeah, I feel so bad about that.
Very good.
Okay, has anybody got any questions? I've started to record now. I just can't remember.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, you've got any questions? Go right ahead.
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
You know, actually, what I can't understand is why is this China so keen to help, you know, like water projects, and what's in it for China? Because, you know, there's no such thing as a free lunch, is it? You know, there must be something in it for China.
Yeah, well, there's a lot, in fact, because if you are able to sort of build dams in those countries, the countries, they're poor, so they invite investment. So in a way, it is good for both China bringing in the investment because they hope to get some return from it. And secondly, the local country benefits it from having to manage its water better. And then, of course, it also means that the total flow of water, right from the very source, from emanating from China, that can also be, in fact, in the control of China and not necessarily have unfriendly countries attacking it because they're stealing their water. So it is both politically advantageous to them and economically advantageous to them. Yeah, Malila.
Radio on.
You have to
Sorry,
unmute.
you're going to unmute yourself, Malila.
All right. So I was saying historically, wherever a dam is built, it's followed by misery and disruption for a lot of people. So I would have thought it would go out of fashion because there are other ways of making electricity. There's the sun and there's wind and there's waves in the sea. Whereas dams just haven't been good. Now in Sri Lanka, there are a lot of what's very common are the mini dams, which are sort of very local, small rivers. They just make use of the fall, and it's not connected to a reservoir, so it doesn't disrupt water flow. So I understand that, but the larger dams has caused misery. And as you say,
yeah, the larger dams.
Farmers.
Yeah, the larger dams have this thing about having to relocate people so that the reservoir can have the water to the level that is required in order to generate lots of hydroelectric power. And then they are able to relocate these people, which is the difficult part. A lot of people don't want to be relocated nor lose their land to the reservoir. So that is something that the governments work at it, and it takes a long time to try and get agreement there because a lot of compensation has got to be given and so on and so forth.
Radio sound. Someone turn their radio off.
Is somebody asking is George?
Yeah, is my friend wants to ask a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I must say I've got great concern about this Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia, because it potentially would be such a weapon to create a war. As cutting off the Nile would mean virtually wiping out Egypt. And the building of this dam, the Zionist government of Israel has been quite involved in it. So I'm thinking along the future, eventually to create a war in that area, the easiest way to do it is to cut off the water. And that would be unbelievable disaster.
Yeah, I think the possibilities are there, but I think the consequences are so serious. It takes only a few bombs to knock out the whole dam, you know, and it's not easy to give 100% security. So I would not consider that to be a good way to try and force a war situation.
With modern weapons, it will actually defend the dam wall. The latest guided missile systems and so on. I mean, that would be a military thing, but
I'm finding it hard to hear because there's some radio on.
Can those people who are not talking put their the audio off? It's only when you want to say something, put it on.
yeah. I see it as a potential serious problem by starting a war, unless they come to some really.
Okay, George, can you unmute yourself because I've unmuted everybody or muted everybody?
No, just again.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm saying if the solution would be if they really come to a very strong agreement with all the countries in the area that there is a water flow and it doesn't do damage by cutting it off. Because even if it takes 10 years to fill the dam, if those figures are nearly correct, like 14%, even if it was 7%, that would be quite a disaster because I've been down the Nile many times and I know parts of northern Egypt, and even Alexander would be affected. The city of Alexander would be affected by it. So I see it as a possible time bomb.
Yeah, it's all these flashpoints. Are so many of them all over the world. That's where the job of politicians and diplomats comes in. And they need to be able to sort of manage the show so that everybody has a win-win situation. But if somebody tries to take full advantage, then of course it's a recipe for disaster for all. And I think cooler minds must prevail and the better angels should guide the people.
Because as it is now, they have some form of war going on in Ethiopia itself.
Yeah, they are constructing the dam. They have enough water. What they're after in that dam is to generate electricity.
Yeah.
And the electricity is going to be the biggest sort of hydroelectric power in Africa, creating something like 6 gigawatts of or 6,000 gigawatts of electricity, whatever, huge figure. And they want to be able to sell the electricity and be able to make a living, good income from that. But I think that's not going to happen straight away. They need to be able to come to terms with these very big countries like Egypt and Sudan. Yeah, Pam.
I was just going to say Egypt's already suffering because of COVID. The tourist industry shut, and they're really struggling. The country will be finished if they cut the water off.
Yeah, well, I don't think any government will survive
No.
because the people will rise. Therefore, the governments will be forced to act. and either they go to war or do some other type of agreement so as to sort of keep the show going.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, Malela.
Yeah, just to go back again, apart from dislocation of people, the way it affects everyone downstream of a river is all the fisheries and farmers are affected. I mean, as you've mentioned. So why hydroelectricity? I mean, with the sunshine there down in Africa, they could supply the rest of the world with solar energy. I mean, how does the cost, what is the cost equivalent if you compare?
Well, the thing
I'm
about
totally
energy,
against dams. Pardon?
sorry, I'm saying that electricity is so fundamental to our living nowadays that it impacts all aspects of our lives and our jobs and everything that we do. Economic well-being depends on how easy our energy costs are and how sustainable a system of energy we've got. And the cleanest energy so far, I think, is really solar, and after that, the hydro. And therefore, people are going to go for that because in the future, they're going to get more money from the financial institutions for projects which are green and not for coal burning type of power plants, you know.
So isn't solar energy a good alternative to hydroelectricity?
Yeah, the solar energy is
More
only during the
reliable.
sun shines, but you need to have storage after that. That's why Elon Musk's batteries are so important. Maybe that's the
So
solution
he's
in the
bringing in
future.
batteries, yeah.
But with
I don't know.
hydropower,
Mm.
with hydropower, it's a continuous thing so long as the water is there in the storage, in the reservoir.
Yeah, well, the weather's changing. I don't know.
Yeah,
Right.
right. Anybody else? Good. Yeah, George, you're saying, oh, sorry, George, go ahead.
What about the River Thames? Got any
Sorry?
plans for the River Thames?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Hang on. Have you got any plans for the River Thames?
Oh, well, we've got the barrier. At least we stop the sea coming in.
Yeah, well, up where we live at Pimlico, the water is just up to the top now.
Really?
Yeah.
I think when they open the sluice gates, it'll go down, won't it?
Yeah, but it's very high. You can imagine what it would be like if the barrier wasn't there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, you need to have a good amount of focus on water management because water is such a good resource that we want to be able to manage it, you know, sensibly. And they are working on it. Okay, Giselle, put your audio on. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know whether anyone else has heard or anyone heard the recent webinar that I heard on Innovation Africa, started by an Israeli girl about 20 years ago when she got her first job after she graduated in Africa, in Cameroon. And she was horrified when she saw how they were lacking power, they were lacking water, there were a lot of illnesses because of the dirty water. And I think she graduated in engineering, same as what you have. And she started this project getting energy from solar power. And it's grown and grown, and they've become really big. It's now supplying energy to about, loads of African countries, to millions of people, all through solar power. It's doing extremely well. It's growing all the time.
Yeah, see, the thing about the solar power, the thing about the solar power is that it produces electricity during the sun, during the day, but at night it doesn't. So you need to have it stored so that you use it at night, and that's where the batteries come in. And if the batteries are sufficiently good, and they are becoming, if you look at the cost of alternate energy, it's the same or even less than the fossil fuels now. which means that solar and hydro and all this green energy type of ideas, they are now economically feasible and better, in fact, than the traditional forms of energy, fossil fuel, coal, or oil or gas, whatever. So there is a lot of potential there, which is going to be our future, in fact. Yes, Ruth. You have to undo your.
Yeah. You said that hydroelectricity would is the greener option, but if it results in no fish and the silting stopping, is it the greener version? I mean, is it going to have a bad effect in the long run?
It depends on the design of these dams. There are some dams that are able to let the sediment and the nutrients flow through, because some of them sink to the lower levels, and you can open them up so you can let. So it has a lot to do with how you manage the water resources you have. As it is, water management is such a big sort of issue in all sorts of countries, because you have so many fertilizers going into the water table, and that irrigation systems are not as efficient as they should be. All of those type of issues. So water needs to be managed well. And hopefully sooner or later, the call about desalination plants and so on, at the moment they're still not plentiful, because it still requires a fair amount of energy to get fresh water out from seawater. But it's one of the solutions that's going to be happening before long. So we'll have to see how well we manage the water resources.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. Anybody else? John, you're still there? Probably not. Okay, we'll call it a day. I'll have to go back and do my repeat lecture because I didn't record it.
No, John is still here. Sorry, we were muted.
Yeah.
Thank you. Nick, that was really interesting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. See ya.
Okay. Take care.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Yeah.